Live your life, boy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for war?
Yeah, rear naked choke of Cocker Spaniel, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Bro.
Change the neighborhood up.
Conspiracy Farm. Go. Check it out.
All right, let's take it away for another amazing episode. I'm, as always, joined by my co-host, genius of the show, Wilson. Jeffrey, how are you?
I'm doing okay, bro. Just hanging in here. Looking forward to chatting with this gentleman. A lot of interesting stuff he's been going through, but I'll let him take it away because this is a very interesting conversation coinciding with a lot of other kind of stuff I've been delving into. We got some T-shirts coming out soon. The store will be up soon. One of the hashtags I have, IAOC. It's all organized crime. And as we're seeing with so much of what we see in the world, locally and even federally and even globally, baby, it's all organized crime. And he's going to talk about his little slice that he's dealing with. Mr. Alki David, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. It's lovely to be on the show, guys. I appreciate you both.
Yeah, and Patrick, you have the full bio. Lay it on us.
Properly introduce our friend Alki David, somewhat of a famous gentleman, billionaire, king of Mastaland, Antigua, and consul general for Antigua and Barbuda. He first introduced the things that he's dealing with. Judges out in California faking witness testimony, creating false Me Too moves, money laundering, fine witness testimony, tampering with witnesses, you name it. There's some craziness going on out there that's accused of all of these folks out there. And Alki, how are you, Alki, and what's the status of everything right now?
Well, how's the connection, by the way? Is the connection okay?
I can hear you well. Pat,
Okay, good. Okay, well,
Okay.
Look, so California, the beautiful state of California, where we have one weather really generally good, is in a state of emergency like I've never experienced before. Maybe this happens every generation. Maybe this is just an understanding of things that our fathers or grandfathers went through, in previous decades. But right now, we are living a brand new set of issues, which is the complete criminality, or the criminalization, should I say, of the California judiciary. And primarily the civil courts, but there are also very many deeply corrupted federal judges. But as per Tom Girardi and his crew's design, the civil courts of California have been entirely corrupted by a syndicate of individuals who are very well known to the public.
If you can qualify who that is, Tom Girardi, because he is central to all of this.
Sure. So Tom Girardi is famous for allegedly being the Aaron Brockovich lawyer, who then came to California via a number of ways. But came to California. He studied at Loyola Law School. He became famous for being the assistant of Aaron Brockovich's lawyer, and then rose rapidly, becoming a super lawyer in California. He was selected by Governor Gavin Newsome to select all members of the state bar that supervise lawyers and their activities, right? And at the same time, he also bribed the head of the Supreme Court, a guy called Ronald George. Oddly enough, this is a very interesting fact. The Supreme Court of California is owned by a corporation, which is in fact owned by a man called Ronald George, who used to be the Supreme Justice of California, who was, he has a law firm called the George Law Firm here in Los Angeles. His son, Eric George, is very well known. And is considered to be the next great fixer of cases in California currently. So I'm outing you, Mr. George, as a criminal douchebag. If you're listening, thank you. and this man, his father, Ron George, actually owns the corporation that owns the Supreme Court of California. That is an extraordinary form, because America is made up of corporations. The government is made up of corporations. It happens to be that in this case, a agency, which isn't even really governmental, but it's a government, it's a governmentally supervised agency of the State Bar of California would be one thing, but the Supreme Court of California being owned by an individual who was disgraced in leaving his office continues to operate underhandedly the state's legislature, which to me I find a staggering fact. But we can move on from that. Was that was that point clear? Or did you understand what I just said?
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So this guy Ron George was then replaced by a woman called Tani Cantil Sukukaye, who just retired as the Superior Court Supreme head judge of the Supreme Court, and on retirement after being outed by the LA Times. If you go to latimes.com or shokya.com or tbmix.com and search this woman's name, Cantil, Cantil is her first name, Cantil Sukiyaka. She is the Supreme Court. She took more money from Tom Girardi than anybody else. She just retired from the Superior Court of LA. And she herself has said that the whole lot needs complete reform. The whole and we're talking about the Supreme Court justice saying that the Superior Court of Los Angeles needs total reform because of what Tom Girardi has done. Imagine this. Have you heard of a mediation company called JAMS?
I have not.
Okay, so JAMS here on the West Coast is one of the largest mediation companies that are ordered by the courts to mediate, civil court or criminal court trials, right? And there is in fact a law that you have to go through mediation in the first round of talks. And JAMS was recently fined, get this, $15 million for fixing a lawsuit with Tom Girardi, right? Because this company represents retired judges who handle these mediations. These mediations range anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to hundreds of thousands and into millions of dollars. And it all depends on, obviously, the case. But in this particular case, Tom Girardi and JAMS were caught and fined $15 million for fixing a case, yet the company is still operating. The company is still taking on more. It's as if it's just like those judges in New York that were just caught for the pay for kids in the incarceration system. They paid $750 million restitution, and not a single one of them saw jail. $750 million restitution, and no jail. How is that possible?
It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. It's beyond frustrating because it's systemic. Like I'm saying, when I say it's all organized crime, like it's crazy the layers of this. And obviously, Alki, you're talking about just what you got going on in California. I mean, it's so deep seated, and it for all of us, it just winds up eroding our faith in these basic institutions.
We are talking about unelected douchebags sitting in courthouses for 20 years plus, causing mayhem on society. These are unelected people who every 6 years get automatically reelected through what are called mini bars, not state bars. They are mini bars and state bars and organizations that are supposed to supervise the judiciary, lawyers, the CJC, the council, the committee that supervises the judges is also managed by the same group. But these guys, they let these people run riot, unelected. The public is really never advised, unless you dig and you know the system and understand the system. Right. You're not going to know that this goes on. And the public relies on the trust that it has on its public servants to ensure that this shit doesn't go on. However, if to remove a judge, an unelected judge, is a relatively easy thing. All you need to do is get 20 votes, signatures rather, from any voter in California to have this judge removed. That starts the recusal process, the removal process. Then the way it works, that judge then has 10 days. Then that judge has 10 days to respond. And if they don't, they're automatically removed. But then the removal, because they were unelected, the requirement for having these people removed is the smallest vote of the county that year. So in Los Angeles, it could be anywhere from 50 to 150 votes on the smallest election, and that would be enough to get a judge removed. Now, all of that is in place because we live in a republic. However, that isn't how it works.
Right.
Because once that letter is deposited, it then, like any complaint, there were over 220 complaints made about this one Tom Girardi to the state bar over decades, and not one was ever reviewed. 6 of them were mine. I had 6 state bar complaints written up about this guy who wrongfully accused me of a rape that never happened, and the girl has recanted, and the girl is in hiding from the very syndicate that she was persuaded to make up these lies with. This syndicate are a bunch of lawyers, primarily. Are you getting this?
Yes.
Comcast employees.
Comcast, who owns like NBC.
Yes, Comcast Ventures is a holding company in New York that owns NBC, Comcast, along with 200 other major brands, including Vimeo, Vox, Double Verify, MSNBC, you name it. Then they are funded, obviously, by BlackRock and Vanguard, who are...
Enough said.
Right. And so this company is owned by the Chinese Communist state, which, in fact, today owns Fox News and NBC. So one company that owns CNN and Fox News is owned by the Chinese Communist state.
Rupert Murdoch's News Corp doesn't own Fox News?
No, they spun off Fox News, along with a whole bunch of other assets. Look who Snell, who runs NBC now, used to run Fox News. Right?
It's a revolving door, yeah.
Yeah, it's a revolving door of these media executives last 18 months until they go to another media organization. I know every single one of these people intimately well over decades because that's been my business. And I've been the independent. I'm one of these independents that's come in with a bunch of money and broken ground to create new forms of media. And every now and again, one of us succeeds and we have a breakthrough. And I've been, I own the hologram technology that did Tupac at Coachella. I own a streaming company called Filmon that's been to the Supreme Court 3 times with the major networks. I own publishing, different publishing platforms such as Mondo Tunes or Octave that has partnerships with Sony and Universal. So, there are independent corporations that have got partnerships with this monolith of media that is now, for the most part, owned and operated by the Chinese Communist state, and that is a fact. You don't just have to listen to me. Go to Harvard Edu, go to Harvard or just look up the Harvard Media Studies project, and you will see how media is owned in America, and it is staggering that 95% plus of mainstream American media today is owned and operated by the Chinese Communist state. This is a fact. And this is not just me saying this. This is a bunch of very clever people at Harvard who've spent years studying it saying this.
Wow.
Yeah, along with, having to be able to control the narrative, but also controlling huge interest in, companies like Smithfield Meats, 2,500 farms just associated with those meat processing plants, West Texas oil fields, all kinds of different sectors of energy, food, and media. It's pretty terrifying when you really think about just how intertwined they are within our government, within our food sources.
Let me take that a step further. The air that we breathe carries that media through electromagnetic rays called broadcast television or radio, correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir. That air, what electromagnetic rays are broadcast in today's air is broadcast through a standard called ATSC 3.0. ATSC is the compression system used for digital spectrum to broadcast these signals over the air. ATSC 3.0 is controlled by a Chinese company called NextGen. NextGen ostensibly controls the American airwaves through this electromagnetic broadcast. Now, major television networks like NBC, CBS, Fox, ABC Television have licenses mandated by the government to control this air. And that is why they are called major television broadcasters, and that is why they network the whole country. Now, the basis of their licenses belongs on just these licenses. Now, next-gen software is not just in television. It is also your medical insurances. It is also the prison system. In other words, the privatized penal system, which is owned by Vanguard and BlackRock and Amazon, are controlled by this Chinese-owned platform called NextGen. And it's much more diabolical than that even, because it also controls the air traffic control systems. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we are under occupation by NextGen, which is, in fact, the Chinese Communist state.
And when you start talking about that kind of infiltration when it relates to our critical infrastructure, they could easily flip the switch and just shut us down.
Or light us up, or enslave us to their products and their ratings, which is already in full effect. In other words, there is a company called Double Verify, which is owned by Comcast Ventures. I have sued them. I went all the way to the Supreme Court of California, and we changed the law. The law is Film On, which is my company, Film On versus Double Verify. That is a custom. You look it up and you'll see LexisNexis, law.com, everybody using this as case law on what we did, which was to flip the law around corporate defamation and using demurs and tools like that to block defamation. In America, you've got the First Amendment. In Europe, that doesn't exist. So defamation has a whole different standard. It actually carries prison sentences in Europe in some cases.
Wow.
And so when these when the First Amendment, along with corporate defamation, is used, it's the Chinese way: defame and renegotiate. Right now, I'm not saying that the Chinese communists are the evil, shitty people that they are. I'm saying that both sides are being played by a bunch of warlord capitalists at Vanguard and over at BlackRock that create this corporate warlordism.
And that's what I always contend on this show. If you know their name, they're really not running anything. And I think it even goes above even your Vanguards, your BlackRocks. There's much higher globalists. We like to talk about the black nobility, much higher globalist, financial, ancient, old school money powers that, basically put all this stuff in motion.
Yeah, but that's where you get lost. But that's where you lose it. That's where you lose it, because that's where, in today's world, what America and China, for that matter, have got going for them are the laws. These are nations built on laws, right? Both of them. And the legislature has been usurped, certainly in America. And I would argue by the Chinese Communist state in China. However, these laws, when policed and when respected, really create a transparency and a way for the republic or the communist state to thrive. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The law is what is at stake. It's not so much our freedom. Our freedom comes with there's a very famous you remember the post Nuremberg, the trials that went on to try the Nazi leaders after the war. Right, there were a bunch of laws created at the time that were recently reinstated for trafficking, to protect people being trafficked from border crossings and so on. Now, but the same laws apply to the use of media and the legislature, the corruption of the media and the corruption of the legislature in order to traffic people through the courts. At the time of the Nazi, at the time of the post 1945, all those Nazis were tried under these new Nuremberg laws that were created by American justices that were using the media and the financial institutions and ultimately the regulatory, the legal systems to enslave then the Jews and then any other kind of dissenting crowd. Were always being enslaved by the judiciary. The judiciary is what goes first that captures a nation.
And when you talk about laws and my big thing is like the application of laws. They set these things aside, like beginning of this conversation, this cabal of judges out there in California spearheaded by Girardi. It's just, they're untouchable. There is no accountability. So even though the laws are there, those laws become almost irrelevant when they set them aside.
There's supposed to be accountability.
Of course.
We were supposed to live in a republic where the strength belongs to the people, the power belongs to the people. But that connection to the power is muddied, it's obscured, it's lost, it's buried, or that is the art of the bait and switch of manipulating the law. The lawyers themselves have practices today where they navigate the law, then they bury it by, for example, a sexual harassment accusation. I've had two of them where people accuse me for 3 years of sexual harassment, and then on the day of the trial, drop the sexual harassment and convert it to unfair dismissal. And that happens whether it's a sexual harassment lawsuit or not. It at some point they will flip it in such a way so that there is no rash of sexual harassment lawsuits in the record. Do you understand me?
Yeah. Well,
and these practices of bait and switch are done in many other ways as well. But fundamentally, the law is constantly being perverted and obstructed.
And this is why basically people look upon this country, I mean, it's nothing new, as a sort of banana republic with the absurdity of the setting aside the law that we're seeing now.
People look at America as the gold standard of justice because that is how the treaties have been set up.
Ideally, but we still have a lot of people who, I mean, not to completely digress, but we have a lot of people who still believe Lee Harvey Oswald shot JFK with his crappy rifle on the 6th floor. I mean, it was so much bigger than that, but yet most people think that that's what happened. And if you're able to kill a president under dubious circumstances, this isn't the land of the free, home of the brave. I mean, I love this country. I'm not saying I don't. I'm just saying the things that have been done to pervert the law, as you're talking about, and specifically like this cabal of judges out there in freaking L.A. with Girardi's crew. I mean, specifically your case, this Judge Elwood. Nothing's wrong with nepotism, but Judge Elwood has 2 sons also in the superior court, and they're basically like Pat, you alluded to.
Generational.
It is
this
generational.
Cabal is absolute. I mean, look from Biden to, Kamala Harris's brother-in-law, right? West was the head of the Obama Treasury, right?
No,
and,
I thought that was Paul. Anyway. No,
but
you're right.
West,
it's generational.
right?
It's generational, and this, like I said, this goes back to well, not to go too deep into it, but like it's old school. When you talk about Illuminati or black nobility, this stuff goes on a very, very long time, and the ties are very deep. But a lot of these people are basically useful idiots, but they're still profiting and benefiting from their position. Your case,
bro, there are judges in California who are illiterate.
That's not funny.
They cannot read or write, but they have a function. There are thousands of judges here in California. There are way too many lawyers in California. It's
the world is full of successful derelicts.
Kim Kardashian is going to be a California lawyer, for God's sake. I know Kim. She's a sneaky, clever little girl, but she's no freaking lawyer. She's not educated in that. Believe me, I know her personally. I've done a TV show with her. I own the second volume of the sex tape. I got it from Ray J.
Nice.
All right. So, and I'm going to turn it into a wholesome piece of Americana. Would you believe it?
Well, it apparently already is, because that's apparently the story of how the American dream in 2023 is get a sex tape, get some get an OnlyFans. But again, with your case, this Judge Elwood Louis, talk about that specifically, because they are making shit up about you to get a piece of this $54 million judgment. Talk to us a little.
That's just one of them, right? I've got a total judgment of about $100 million for alleged knee touching that never happened.
Jeez.
So this guy Elwood Louis, right? By the way, Loyola Law School in Hollywood is the fountain for most of these corrupt judges. Girardi is the Loyola Law School was formerly known as the Girardi School of Law. Gloria Allred, his alter ego, was also a graduate of Loyola Law some 40-something years ago. Or you just go to Balatopia or whatever to look up these judges, and you will see every single Loyola Law School member seems to have somehow managed to have made it onto the Supreme Court bench.
Well, and
for example,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Judge Michelle Williams Court, one of the $54 million judgment was originally made by this lawyer called Judge Michelle Williams Court, Loyola Law School graduate, who originally went to see Gloria Allred because her husband was beating her. And she had tried previously to get onto the bench a couple of times and failed. But she went to see Gloria Allred about her husband beating her. And she then gets turned on to Tom Girardi, who fast-tracks her to the bench. And now she becomes Gloria Allred's owned and operated judge. There are many judges on the bench today like this. There are many judges on the bench today that have been taken up to the Yellowstone Lodge in Montana, had videos of them being having sex with sex workers from Vegas, provided by Girardi, former Sheriff Lee Backer, and the now deceased Harry Reid, who owned this place that was filled with video cameras and still is today, by the way.
Getting a hold of that blackmail material.
Yeah, well, and this is all funded by the Sinaloa cartel. All of this activity is funded. All of these lawsuits, my lawsuit, all these big contentious lawsuits that you hear about, they're mostly funded by the Sinaloa cartel with information that comes from people like Ari Emanuel or Jamie Dimon over at JP Morgan. These people report, my good friend Kanye West, his bank records were made openly available by Jamie Dimon to Ari Emanuel, who then hands that on to lawyers who then persecute him. This is how they operate. They find out who's got what, and then they find out the weaknesses, and then they operate on them.
Not to digress too much, but are you familiar with the recent accusations with Katie Hobbs and the Sinaloa cartel as it relates to deeds and housing stuff? And I mean, it's down in the Southwest in your neck of the woods, but it's Arizona. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I do know that property is a big push of the Chinese Communist state in Northern California, in Modesto. There are an awful lot of problems with children being these contentious lawsuits being created, children being removed from family homes, money being taken from people, and being used as leverage to either take the home or take the cash. And this is all being run by a guy called Towery. His name is Towery. He's a lawyer in Northern California who is at the center of this whole cabal there. He is the Girardi of Northern California, Towery.
Wow.
All right. And this guy is in wholesale closing down, not necessarily rich or middle-income people, even poor people are having their homes taken away, homes that they have been given either by the state or by, and they are being defamed, they are being incarcerated. I mean, I just did 6 days in county for contempt of court.
Just not answering questions, right?
Well, no, I was saying to the judge, I have started a federal racketeering and federal antitrust lawsuit against all these people. This lawyer, Joseph Chora, who is part of this cabal, he's like the executioner, the debt collector for these guys in Beverly Hills. I said, this man here is named in a federal and racketeering lawsuit that has stood the merits in the Supreme Court of in the Supreme Court of Texas, and it's being moved to California in order to be prosecuted. So this civil court nonsense that you've got me wrapped up in needs to stop. And that's what he threw me in jail for.
Well, to reaffirm To reaffirm,
and he kept me one day over, and he took away my service dog at the beginning of all of this, and that's so this man Judge Falls in Pomona is threatening to incarcerate me for multiple years on the 14th of this month if I show up in court and don't do exactly what he wants. He's threatening me with multiple years incarceration and he's a civil court douchebag, right? Who's been in court he was appointed by, I forget which governor, 23 years ago, and he hasn't been elected once. Jeez, wow. Not once. Every 6 years, this mother chucker, he automatically gets reelected because he runs unopposed. If you run unopposed, you get automatically reselected, and on for the rest of your life. So you can cause mayhem and corruption, and they don't care because, there's nobody there to supervise them. And then if there is somebody to supervise them, somebody's got something on them.
Always.
So, you're swimming in deeply polluted waters. Yeah.
Well, and that's always seems to be the MO. Like, nobody gets to rise to any level unless there's something on you. You're blackmailable. They can't have any kind of, lone wolf doing the things they want to do in there. It's almost like any cabal, if you will. Like, you have to be compromisable. And as we drop more names on this, and this is really so. Anyway, when you start talking about Loyola Law in Hollywood, along with Elwood Wee, who was presiding over your case, there's another judge named Victoria Chavez. And talk to me about her in addition to another young lady. When we reaffirmed this, it's all organized crime, Yolanda Orozco, who is apparently that
woman right there.
Apparently the money launderer in chief is what they call her. I'm sorry.
I tried to get that woman to recuse herself from my case for a year. To the point where she said to me, Mr. David, I can put you in prison for many years, and I don't have to tell anybody anything why I did that. And you know what I said to her? I said, try it on you, beep. You're
talking about Chavez? Chavez did this?
I know, I'm talking about Orozco. So Orozco is known as the money launderer in chief.
Yeah.
The reason being that she was at Jones Day. She was the managing partner of Jones Day, which is one of the top 3 or 4 law firms in America, and or whatever. It's a big law firm in America. Their franchise here in LA was owned and operated by this group. Now, Yolanda Orozco was a managing part of Jones Day when Jones Day was being paid enormous amounts of money by the city for looking after one Sheriff Lee Backer. Lee Backer was the sheriff of LA County, who went away for 3 years for lying to the FBI. His deputy just got out of jail after Paul Tanaka, after spending 5 years in prison for lying to the FBI, who I've had my own run-ins here. I've had my own runs with the FBI, the Secret Service, everything here in Los Angeles that you can imagine. I've met they've come to my home to harass me at one stage or another. I've been dragged out of my own home in Malibu, California, my $30 million home that belongs to my children, right? I've been dragged out of this with no warrant, no nothing, handcuffed, held for 3 hours purposefully, and then released on a parking violation.
What is it, sir? Why do they have such a hard-on for you? What is it about? I mean,
because I'm calling them out.
Yeah.
Because it's kill or be killed in my mind. In as much as these people are out of control. They are so out of control that they. I never did anything to anybody wrongful, yet they have able to besmirch my, like, for example, accusing me, these 3 people accused me of sexual harassment for 3 years, each one of them, in the press, in TMZ, and blah, blah, blah. And on the day of the trial, they drop it because they know that they're not going to, but by then it's too late. By then I'm the monster. By then, blah, 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 blah. So this is how they op. And fortunately, going in, I was already eccentric. So it doesn't. I don't care what people think of me, to tell you. I've really learned how to live with that principle, guys. Of we exist only wholly in ourselves.
Yes, sir. Your opinion of me is none of my business. But as again, reaffirming how dirty these guys can get. You already mentioned Gloria Allred, Michael Avenatti,
Lisa Bloom.
Lisa
Yeah,
Bloom,
Michael Avenatti's in jail.
now
by the
serving
way.
14 years. Who was that? What was it? Stormy Daniels' lawyer, I believe it was.
He was the head of the syndicate in San Diego.
But he's a part of these cabal that has targeted you for a very long time.
Completely. Yeah, I know him personally. I've had lunch with that man twice, and also Robert Shapiro. Big shout out to ugly Robert Shapiro. If he hears this, oh, by the way, I've got all these people's phone numbers. I will be publishing them soon in the right format so that it's completely legal. But you know, these people are completely out of control. These are lawyers who fix cases in wholesale for ultimately the biggest insurance fraud scam that has happened to America ever. We're talking about billions, if not trillions of dollars over decades of fixed insurance lien scams. And that is what it's, yes, that is what it's about. It's all based on from the insurance adjuster all the way through to the judge. Everybody gets a piece. And it's all done through the Girardi network of corrupted.
Is that where the 54 million comes from, or is that something different?
Well, I had insurance, but I said, no way you're touching insurance. I'm going, you're taking me on. So I haven't called insurance, nothing. I mean, that's long gone, that boat. But they were, I don't think that they were expecting a fight back, but I have no choice. It really is for me. It really is kill or be killed.
Yeah, absolute survival of the fittest, man. I mean, when they're coming at you like that, you really don't have a choice. And so when you start talking about, I mean, you're not the only one who's dealt with this. And some recent information you put out, Rose McGowan, Steve Wynn, 50 Cent.
So Rose McGowan is a great example, right? Rose McGowan is a poster child of the Me Too movement, right?
Yeah.
But they completely castigated her as a lunatic when Rose McGowan came out and said, hey, hold on a second. Harvey Weinstein raped me. Now Lisa Bloom is representing him while Gloria Allred is trying to put him in prison, promoted by Jennifer Siebert Newsom, who's the wife of Gavin Newsom. All of these people, Gavin Newsom, Jennifer Siebert Newsom, Lisa Bloom, Gloria Allred, Gary Dordick, Keith Griffin, Tom Girardi, Michael Avenatti, all of these people are Comcast goons. They are all employed mostly. All of them are employees of Comcast. And Comcast, going once again, is the Chinese Communist state. The Supreme Court of California, gentlemen, is completely overrun by the Chinese Communist state today. Troy, I've got Troy Perez on the line. He just called me randomly. Troy is part of my crew in the antitrust lawsuits that we have filed against these people that are working their way through the courts now. So we've got a lawsuit called Alki David versus Tom Girardi out in the courts now. And that, ladies and gentlemen, could be the lawsuit that really does a lot of damage to this cabal.
Well, you have Yolanda Orozco dipping out. She's retiring a little early this month or next month. Sounds like she's
That's right. It took me a year. Listen, for a year, I tried to get this woman to recuse herself for a year. And then finally, on the day that she decides to wrongfully give away my children's home and it's clearly owned by a trust and has been for decades, she decides to break the law and on many instances and just give away property that isn't even in my name or was ever in my name, and or belonged to me in any way. But she chooses other people to steal from using me. I mean, it's amazing to the extent that they will. And you see, for example, there are orders floating around that these people have drafted that are are completely criminal. But because they've got a seal and a stamp and a thing, it goes through the process. And nobody questions it. For the most part, that is what happens. Most people just don't question what goes on.
No. Do you remember the movie, Pat? Do you remember the movie, or you, Alki, the movie Star Chamber, the Michael Douglas movie back in the day?
Yes, I do.
That's what this kind of reminds me of. And I've seen different iterations of this where it's like through a technicality somebody gets off, but the cabal behind the scenes makes it right through their whatever means. But and this is so ubiquitous. This isn't just L.A. This is a little bit of freaking everywhere. And it has been going on for a very long time.
Look at the Murdoch trial. Look at the Murdoch trial just now, right, in South Carolina. That was a family that was its own little cabal there for a very long time.
I didn't know much about that trial at all. Really?
So this is the guy. This is the guy that killed his son
and his wife. I saw that, and he just got convicted.
Right.
But I didn't know there was.
Right, but he was a big trial lawyer. He came from a long line of state attorneys. So these are attorneys. Kind of like a U.S. attorney, but for the state, right? This was generational, and you get a badge, you get this, you get that, and these people can just do, wrongdoing in wholesale, and get away with it generationally for decades. And this is what happens throughout the United States.
Yeah.
In one way or another, they are the law families or the judicial families that control the outcome of a lot of what a lot of the wrongdoings that go on today.
Wow. So what is the next step for you in all of this? I mean, obviously they're still coming at you, and like you said, you're backed into a corner. You're almost in fight or flight mode. What is the next step? How does this play out in the next 3 to 6 months?
Well, on the 14th, I'm in court with this judge. I'm not going to tell you what we're doing because I've also got my attorney listening to me right now. I'm not going to tell you what we're doing, but the law is and always was on our side. The question is enforcement of that law and prosecution of that law. And in a place where even my own lawyers in California, most of them, the moment there is a whiff of dissent, they will be eliminated. They will have their license taken away or indeed killed. 4 of my lawyers have been murdered. And I'm not joking when I say that Barry Rothman died in a dentist chair at the age of 73. Rebecca Rini, my FCC lawyer in her 40s, mysteriously died right after my company was positioned, my itty-bitty company was positioned with all the majors. The only company to appear, Filmon and Cinema Now were 2 companies that I owned amongst Google, Amazon, Fox, CBS, all of the major players. I was the only so they got rid of me by getting rid of the NPRM by killing my lawyer. Then there is John Quirk with a Q. He was a former CIA operative investigating Gloria Allred. He died in Turkey. He was murdered in Turkey. He was run down. This was about 6 months ago. And then there is another lawyer called Phil Kay, who was not my lawyer, but he's the lawyer of one of my whistleblowers. Phil Kay was murdered after he filed some FISA court documents, and he had been pursuing the same cabal through other wrongdoings that they had done. So, and finally, my lawyer, my state bar lawyer, who was partners with Tom Girardi, a guy called Murray Greenberg. I'm outing you, Murray. I'm sorry. But Murray Greenberg, my own state bar lawyer, who decided he had had enough of the corruption of the state bar, decided to take up my case and write a complaint. He wrote the complaint, and now the man is hiding in Arizona in fear of his life. Okay?
Wow. Well,
reason why these cunts have, excuse my French.
No, it's quite all right.
The reason why these people haven't killed me yet is because I'm not worth anything to them dead.
Well, a statement I very rarely dust off on this show, considering the heaviness of the conversation. I have no intentions of ever killing myself. Champ, would you like to give that little bit of a disclaimer right now?
I absolutely have no intention of killing myself. In fact, while I was incarcerated in LA County, which is an abomination on humanity, and I'm deeply, deeply ashamed to be a taxpayer in California and know that that prison exists. There are men locked up in there for 35 years plus in a jail. They are incarcerated in a jail and going for resentencing. I was in a room 6x4 with every color of feces you can imagine, every kind of bodily fluid you can imagine, every kind of scream and helpless wail you can imagine. 24/7, right? I was locked up in there wrongfully. I was supposed to be out after one day, even by law. I was supposed to be out. I was kept there 6 nights, locked up, completely in isolation, allegedly for my protection. But
is there a potential lawsuit that could come from that?
Oh, there are many. Don't worry. But that's the last of my. I got to tell you, while I was in there, I found, I had to go deep into meditation, and I had to go deep, and I actually was able to find hope and feel the greatest feelings of freedom incarcerated in there, simply because of being in touch with the divine, my understanding of God. By doing these things, I was held. And also another thing, I have to give a big shout out to the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, who I have been railing against for quite a long time for their shitty work that they do at the courthouses by not defending innocent people that they see are being trafficked through those courthouses. Everybody, by the way, I've had two stenographers look at me and say, "I got it, baby," when I've said to them, "Did you get that, young lady?" When there has been a contentious moment, like when I said to Judge Orozco, "Try it on, bitch," and she then gave me a 3-month extension. And I looked at the stenographer and I said, "Did you get that, young lady?" And these court transcripts are full of the truth, guys. If anybody ever reads these court transcripts, they will be shocked.
It's always how it is. The devil is always in the details. Like you said, most people just don't read and don't usually follow up on stuff like that. But yeah, it's always good to read the transcripts, or, like I said, stenographers' depositions.
No lawyers read. No judges read. Nobody reads. Nobody reads.
Unreal.
And if you're a millennial, you don't know how to read.
Right. Yeah. Everything is an emoji or a symbol. Like, you don't even know.
Or a Gen Z. Sorry. Please forgive me, millennials. You still do have a bit of something. It's the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys. It's like anybody who's got children or is of that age, they've had no, Christmas has been knocked out of them. They have no dreams, no ambitions, no knowledge on. I had 4 kids staying in an apartment in London, and it took 4 days to figure out how to call a freaking electrician to change a fuse. 4 days. And these are all college dudes. These are all college graduates.
I get it. No, I get it, man. I get it. Our skills are waning anymore, man. Change the oil. I don't know how to change the oil. But before we let you slide, Tom Girardi, who was kind of the really the epicenter of a lot of this, a recent LA Times article, Tom Girardi's epic corruption exposes the secretive world of private.
Times articles. Many.
This is the one I'm just reading here, but it exposes the secretive world of private judges. So this is something that obviously belies something that's been festering and going on, like you said, for a very, very long time. LA needs to get their shit together, because this is next. I mean, it's so indicative of this larger banana republic stuff we see going on, just the perversion of the law, the justice system, et cetera. And nothing's really new under the sun in that regard, but it's just so crazy that so much stuff that's going down that nothing happens. Nothing happens to these people. Katie Hobbs can be the Secretary of State and control elections in Arizona and not recuse herself as she runs for governor, and then we wonder why there's some irregularities.
The very head of the FBI in LA, and you could look that up at the LA Times as well, had to recuse himself, and I hope that guy's gone. But the very head of LA had to admit that his mother took cash and a home as bribes from one Tom Girardi. All right, I've had my own run-ins with the FBI, the fat bureaucratic idiots that they are. They run around this town, absolutely, completely aiding and abetting these criminals. And it's a guy called Brian Gilhooly, who was appointed by Christopher Wray. Brian Gilhooly, you're a dirtbag. And his assistant, a lady called Bienick. I'm trying to remember, Shannon Bienick. She is with the fraud department in New York. These two characters, particularly Gilhooly, is here in Los Angeles causing mayhem after a year and a half of what I believe was an FBI investigation ongoing onto my problems. Brian Gilhooly says to me, Mr. David, I suggest you continue filing your problems on the public bulletin board. And then he went away. And then other things happened with other authorities that reinstated my belief in the authorities, because there are plenty of good people out there
For sure.
whose hand is held back. You know, I mean, Juano Savin came and visited with me. Do you know who that man is?
I do not.
Juano Savin, look him up. He is the midterm's most influential MAGA guy. He's the Daily Beast wrote a big article about him being the most influential midterms influencer. He came to visit me. I had Sheriff Mack from Arizona. Ever heard of Sheriff Mack?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Sheriff Mack came to a Yolanda Orozco performance and saw me call her a bitch to her face. I said, "Try on, you bitch," in court to her face. And I turned around to Sheriff Mack and I said, "Did you see that, Sheriff?" And Sheriff Mack, who came to visit me from Arizona, I paid him $50,000 to come and do work for me. He did way more than I paid him, actually, because this man sat in that courtroom with his face. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. And then he had to go outside and instruct the sheriffs of the Superior Court of Los Angeles, the Stanley Mosque Courthouse. He had to instruct them he had to tell them what the First Amendment was. You know, they select the stupid sheriffs to look after these courthouses, and they make sure that these sheriffs don't know anything about the Constitution. However, even though their sworn allegiance to the Constitution is their basis of everything that they've done, they still don't know what the Constitution is. It's extraordinary.
The inversion of reality. Well, look, and this is obviously, you know, you're out there in Gavin Newsome country with him supposedly maybe running possibly for the Democratic nomination.
Gavin Newsome is responsible in part for the distribution of 67,200 child porn titles distributed by LimeWire, and this is all evidenced by their own hand. He is part of the cabal that propagated and promoted that whole evil wrongdoing that happened during the LimeWire era. Do you remember LimeWire?
Of course, yes.
All right, so like everybody else in the world, they had 18.5% of the world's PCs had LimeWire in them at some point, and this is all evidenced in LimeWire and RIA versus LimeWire LLC, which was Judge Kimberwood in New York. Right.
This goes back to that like Napster, Kazaa, LimeWire when
Exactly. So that was propagated by CBS Interactive. File sharing was an invention of the Chinese Communist state. Sumner Redstone, who was a member of the Chinese Communist Party, was a CIA translator. He's fluent in Mandarin during the war.
Head of Viacom, right? Sumner Redstone, head of Viacom.
That's right. He's through National Amusements with Chinese money. He bought Viacom, CBS, and Paramount Pictures. CBS Interactive was the sole distributor of LimeWire, the sole worldwide distributor of over 2.5 billion downloads, although the court papers say 200 million downloads. It was close to 2 billion downloads of LimeWire, each with about a $5 per download payment, was distributed exclusively by CBS Interactive. And in that, they distributed 67,200 child porn titles that were tagged, named, categorized by them when they discovered them, and then put back into the system to continue the growth of the LimeWire system. It's absolutely shocking. And we're talking about kids from age 1 to 14. This is how they categorize them. It's absolutely diabolical. It is beyond the measure of normal, what you would consider normal criminality. We're talking about the use of file sharing done in a way so that, you know, files were, you know, you think you're opening up, you're opening up the Muppet Show, but it ends up being, you know, something.
Two girls, one cup.
Let's go to that. You know, there were many 2 girl 1 cup reaction videos made by famous actors like George Clooney. You know, would do 2 girls 1 cup reaction videos, and I end up with, what was it, 20 million or something for showing 2 girls 1 cup to get reaction videos in my own office. I'm guilty as charged in that I watched
a copious amount of those because having seen the Two Girls One Cup, it's really kind of I'm a little bit more mature or whatever, but like the guys who like show their mother or their grandmother this shit and their reaction is just so knowing what it is, just seeing how they're just fucking horrified by it. It's I don't know. It shouldn't be funny, but it's funny.
I ended up getting sued because I thought that because we made crazy content before, and we still do. And all these people knew it, but you can't fire anybody for doing a bad job. You can't do anything that is outside the agenda of the Chinese Communist State. Period. And if you do, you will get shut down. You will get shut down in the most criminal ways imaginable.
Right. I haven't talked much because my microphone's not working because my laptop did not pick this up, so I'm on my phone. But I have to ask on a global scale in terms of cartels and the level of criminality that's out there. We see our government, arming and funding the overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2014. The Ukrainian Azov regiments are shelling non-ethnic Ukrainian neighborhoods and locations and cities. And now we've got, of course, the U.S. government. They're not, of course, blaming the pharmaceutical giants. They're, of course, blaming China for, releasing a bioweapon on the world and trying to build a case for going to war with China and Russia at the same time. This is a nightmare that these people are attempting, and it seems like
it's the only way they're going to stay in business, guys, because every government around the world is completely and utterly broke and have been for a very long time. I mean, I don't care how you look at it. We are in how many trillions of debt?
Yeah.
Debt.
36, I think now.
Okay. So I remember when it was $1 trillion and it was shocking. Now it's 36.
Right, exactly. It's all relative at this. I mean,
it was billions. Once upon a time, it was 4 billion. Right. Now, decades later, we're at 36 trillion. The only way these governments around the world, these corrupt douchebaggery governments, are going to stay in business is by war, because that is a write-off, that's a tax write-off, and that is a great way to sidetrack and hijack a nation.
War is a racket, as Medley Butler said. War is big business, man. And I was going to ask you that question that Pat just asked. As everyone's talking about whatever these things we're seeing leaning towards possible war with China, do you see a kinetic war going on for whatever reason it happens? Do you see an actual kinetic war going on, whether it's Russia, China, us, Russia, us, China, us? Do you see anything going down in the next, and I'm talking 10, 20 years?
Look, unless the skin is ripped off my body and I see my eyeballs fly out of my head, I don't know what to believe.
I'm with you there, man. I am with you there.
It's history is written by those who win.
Absolutely.
And nowadays, if it didn't happen on video or a DNA test, it didn't happen. So these are masters of video manipulation. Double Verify, which is this lawsuit that I'm pursuing against this Comcast-owned company for years, who defamed me originally. That's why I'm in a lawsuit with them. They create opinion and ratings. All these ratings companies like ComScore and Double Verify are all these companies that tell you what's cool, what to buy, how much to buy it for, and where to buy it. And this is how you're enslaved. It's not about the body being killed. It's about the body being trafficked.
And this, we say it all the time. Aldous Huxley spoke about, slavery. We're gonna get to a point where we're gonna enjoy our slavery and our servitude. We're gonna ask for it. When you take away the means of enslaving us, we're gonna fight for it. Like, no, give that back to me. And that's really where we're at right now. It's really a sad time. But in addition to, like I said, nothing new is under the sun as far as the perversion of the justice system, but it really sucks that you're the one who has to deal with it and go through it. And I'm glad that you've, decided to fight back, because it's ridiculous what's been happening to you.
I have no choice, bro. I have no choice.
Without a doubt.
They leave you no choice. It really is truly kill or be killed, whether it's metaphoric or whether it's real.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And then that's, the only reason I keep saying, only reason any of this shit happens as far as how they roll over us is because we participate in it. And so any measure of fighting back, and please, I'm not, is this Swiss SwissXisland.com. Is that a good way to get a hold of you?
Swiss X Island. The best place to get hold of me is on Instagram still. I mean, my last account was shut down because I outed Gavin Newsome for some reason. My rather popular account was shut. But you can find me now as Alki David, King of Rastaland, or Alki David Official. Alki, I think that's on Instagram or Twitter. Alki David at Twitter.
Okay, I'm looking at your Instagram here. Yeah, that's SwissXisland.com. Check them out, and I'll put whatever other links in the description. Man, Alki, this has been a really heavy conversation, man. I didn't know much about you, but I mean, it's just hearing. And I was telling Pat, it's very serendipitous, this conversation, because I've been delving down and how deep all this crap goes, and so many for histories. And I talk about Kay Griggs. I don't know if you're familiar with Kay Griggs, but she talks about how so much dirt is done in this country by government, military, etc. And it's leads me to believe that it's all organized crime. Not literally all of it, but so much of this perversion of justice has been going on for a very long time. And you were just one example of it here in LA, where this Superior Court, this cabal out there is just ruining people's lives. It's insane to me. But I thank you, man.
Hey, man, it's like I know what it's like to be black in America. Put it that way. Peace out, guys.